There's no question that the geography and the weather plays such an important part in your writing. Is that a particularly Irish thing?
It is. It's definitely true, because we are on an edge and we are looking out and there's nobody out ahead of us. Maybe also add to some sense of having to look in nature for something other than just nature. So you're near an edge of something, which might be the edge of more than just physical edge.
This is Life and Faith, a podcast where we seek to elevate the conversation about the things that matter, or should matter, deeply human questions about meaning, purpose and hope. No matter what you believe, we hope you'll join us exploring the complexities, the struggles and the joys of life and faith. Welcome to Life and Faith from CPX. I'm Simon Smart. 4 Letters of Love is the 1997 novel by Irish writer Niall Williams and has just been adapted by Williams into a movie that is out now. It stars Pierce Brosnan, Helena Bonham Carter and Gabriel Byrne, so big hitters in the movie industry. And I'm thrilled to bring you a conversation with Niall Williams about the film and the book. It's a love story, but one that offers up intriguing and provocative portraits of faith, loss, tragedy, meaning, and God.
When I was 17, God spoke to my father for the first time.
I'll go to the West and paint for 7 days.
Mr. Coughlin.
Can I come with you?
It feels like we're banishing her. They leave their childhood here.
You are a sinful girl. You will kneel here until these candles burn out.
Oh, sorry.
Don't be sorry. It's fine.
I see your face. For the first time in my life, the world makes sense.
In this world, there's no such thing as chance, Nicholas.
I love him. For it to last a lifetime, it has to be immense at the start.
I write these words to feel your eyes reading them. I have more to say to you than would take a lifetime.
Everything that is beautiful to me is bound up in you.
4 Letters of Love weaves together 2 stories, 2 very different families, that are brought together by chance and random circumstance. Or is it chance? Not according to Pierce Brosnan's character William Coughlin, who firmly believes that there is no such thing as a coincidence. Right at the beginning of the story, Coughlin, entrenched in city life in Dublin, hears God telling him to leave his civil service job in the city to become a painter. It's a calling he can't resist, but one with all sorts of consequences. On the other side of the country, on an island off the west coast, school teacher and poet Maurice Gore, Gabriel Byrne, and his wife Margaret, Helena Bonham Carter, have a daughter Isabel and a son Sean, who through tragic circumstances is confined to a wheelchair, unable to move or speak, and the family spend years hoping for a miracle. And there's also pain and loss as Isabel heads to the mainland for school at the convent. But her wild spirit won't be tamed by the nuns, and she eventually finds herself falling in love with a local young man who, well, let's just say, might not be her father's idea of the perfect suitor. The 2 stories end up crashing together, and it's really compelling reading and now viewing. There are so many brilliant Irish writers at the moment. What is it about that place? And Niall Williams is right up there with the best of them. I spoke to him from his home in County Clare and began by asking him, what's the hardest thing about turning a literary novel into a film?
Well, I think for me, this is my own novel and I'm adapting it. So it might be different for somebody coming in from outside, but I was helped greatly, I think, by the fact that the novel was written 27 years earlier. So therefore, I'm not fresh to it and I'm looking at it in terms of where are the pictures, and what is the shape of the story that might work. And obviously the novel has a straight off difficulty in the way it is structured. In the novel, we have a male story and a female story. The male story is an urban story and the female story is a rural one. The male one is on the east of the country and the female one is on the west. And all of these polarities are split as part of the design of the novel, which then becomes a question as to, will the viewer in the cinema accept that the story is this bifurcated, split story? But it's an essential part of the greater meaning of the novel and ultimately the film. So it is a puzzle as to how these two storylines are going to come together. And that's the case. So I think the first challenge was for me to stay true to the novel and not as if you were to say to yourself, imagine that you could sit beside yourself 27 years earlier and say, now I'm 67 and I wrote the novel before I was 40, and say, well, there's lots of things I would change in the novel if I was writing it now at 67. And I could fix, some of the intensities of it, or I could smooth some of the edges in it and things like that now. And instead to try to say, no, in the film, I'm going to honor the novel as if I've written it today. And I'm going to sort of suppose that my job is to make a film that honors that novel as it was then. Yes. And as it exists, and that the film can sit beside the novel without changing its feeling or writing it from an older man's point of view. So I think that was the main challenge, to sort of stay true to it.
That's fascinating. And do you have any sense of trying to be not just true to the novel, but true to the people who love the novel? So your readers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's what I mean, partly, of course. The novel is the people also who love the novel and who came upon it 27 years ago and have remembered it, or it was important to them in that time in some way.
Yeah. So the way you think of those two things relating to each other, what's it feel like to get to this point in the process?
Well, between the film and the book is a sort of unreal journey of many years in which I often met people who say, oh, I can see it as a film. I can see it as a film, and so on, and dream casts and people sitting around saying, oh, you know who should be in it? You know who I can see in it, and all that. Yeah. So to actually eventually arrive 2 years ago on the location, and to be standing on a street scene, for example, the street where Nicholas's house is, and to see somebody, an actor, young Fionn O'Shea, cycling his bicycle to that house and getting off and the camera's filming it, is a really surreal moment to see something come in 3 dimension like that.
Yes, amazing. It must be very satisfying. And as someone who's read the book and then seen the film, you really do capture the imaginative landscape and the feeling of the city, and then as you say, the east coast, the west coast. Yeah, it captures it beautifully. And
thank you.
Very effective.
Thank you. I think Damien did a wonderful job in the cinematography of the film. And when we were out shooting on the beaches in Donegal and out in the wilds of Donegal, I mean, it has that sense of magic in it. Yeah. And so for me, growing up in Dublin, there was definitely, so I grew up in that kind of world of suburban Dublin, and there was definitely a sense of mystery about the west of Ireland, and that the west of Ireland was this other place. And for a person of a literary sensibility like I was in secondary school, I'm reading set texts which include Yeats, and I'm reading about Yeats and the west of Ireland, and the sense that the west of Ireland had this sort of mystical or mythical past to it. And so therefore in the novel we have this journey that Nicholas has to go from east to west as he heads out there into the west for the first time, to see it for the first time. And I think that is captured in the film beautifully, in the big skies and the big ocean that he lands out at, and it's that sense of something larger than himself.
That's wonderful. Now, the story merges the natural world, it's a very important part of that story, with the supernatural in ways that I think speak to kind of yearnings that our lives would mean something. And some of the characters are convinced of that, right? So they're looking for patterns, they're looking for design in things. Others are not so sure. This is an important lens, though, isn't it? I think your story brings this out, an important lens through which to view the world. It shapes how we interpret so much of life.
Yes. Yeah. So I think there is that. I think so. As I was writing it at that time, I think also where I was myself, I'm aware of the sort of Christian and pagan layering in Irish life,
Yes.
and the people who believe in signs, superstitions. Something is happening. Margaret, the mother of Isabel, she's always trying to feel something is happening, and she's sort of watching the sky and looking at the sky and on the ocean, and that sense of looking for signs at the same time as there's a sort of Christian layer over it. And so I think that's sort of particularly true of Ireland and the west of Ireland, and as I was writing it at that time anyway. And yeah, I think the whole novel actually is about that search for meaning and whether there is a meaning in our lives or a pattern, and whether we feel that there is a fated quality to our lives or not. And I think for most of us, the question of that arises most in relation to our own experience of love. So I think when you meet someone and you fall in love with them, you are so struck by the randomness, first of all, of, well, I just happened to be working in the same place with you, or I happened to be in this where you were. And is that pure chance? Or do you work it backwards and see kind of two lines eventually coming together? So there's a moment, for example, in the film where Nicholas is on the bus and he shares the bus with Isabel, but they don't meet and they just pass each other. And how easily it would have been in our lives to pass by the person that we end up with, right, and not connect to them at that moment. And so I think there's a sort of indelible mystery in that anyway, in all of our lives in relation to love, as there is sort of around death, as to why we die when we die, and how does that make sense at all?
Yeah, I detect in your writing too a kind of sympathy with these characters as they're looking for meaning, and especially in love, in the romantic love.
Yeah, I think so, absolutely. So when I'm writing, Simon, I have no plot or plan for any novel. Yeah. I have a sentence and then the next sentence, and I'm writing to find out what happens.
Even in this story, I hear writers say this a lot, but this story feels like you've had to plan all sorts of different things coming together.
No. Wow. I had no idea.
Amazing.
I had no idea how it was going to work out, who the people were, or any of that. No. Yeah. I've never had, and I still don't have when I'm writing anything. Amazing. I just have a sentence and then follow the next sentence. So I'm writing to find out what happens. I'm writing into mystery and trying to see, and then I'm responding to what's on the page.
Yeah.
And from the page is giving me clues and hints as to where it wants to go all the time. And so I'm reading those clues as I go. So I'm making a map, but I have no idea what the country is until I get to the end and then see, I see how it went. And I would liken that in a way to, if you drive in the west of Ireland, the roads, they don't go straight from A to B. Right. They meander, they follow the contours of the natural landscape. And so they go round this hill rather than through it, or they go here by this river and they follow that and then they turn and so on. So it's a sort of similar thing, I hope, some kind of natural storytelling style that evolves from that. But you still are reading what's happening on the page.
Well, a lot of the stories questioning this idea of miracle. I think that sort of writing is in some ways miraculous, actually. So, there's something there. Now, one of the key characters, William Coghlan, is a civil servant. He's living a kind of, what he's feeling like is a kind of dull life in the suburbs. And he feels like God speaks to him and tells him he has to go and paint. And this upends his life. But it's not a story of release and triumph, is it? It's anything but that, in fact. What is it that this call that he receives and the compulsion to follow it? What's happening there?
Okay, so I think it's not uncommon in artistic life for people to make a decision to pursue an artistic life and then question it and wonder what it is they're doing. So in my case, I grew up in Dublin. I studied in University College Dublin, English literature, and then eventually did a master's degree in American literature. And when I was doing that master's degree in American literature, I met Christine, who had come from America to do a master's in Irish literature. So we were both studying each other's literatures. And I was 21 and I fell in love with her, and we went to America and got married. And like most Irish people trying to get out of Ireland at the early 80s, there was a depressed place and we were trying to get out, and I did. And then 5 years in New York, commuting into Manhattan, working in a good job, but feeling at all the times that I was not living my own life. I was living a life that was kind of laid out for me, and I was just following it along. And I had always wanted to write, and Chris wanted to write and paint. And so on April Fool's Day, 1985, we packed 10 suitcases of books and left New York for this cottage in the west of Ireland. And it's the cottage that Chris's grandfather had left in 1910 to go to America and not come back. So it's a 4-room cottage, farmhouse in County Clare in the west of Ireland. And that's the house that we moved to see if we had any talent, to see if we could write and paint and see if we could make an artistic life. And very soon after making that decision, we had no money and we questioned it. How foolish were we to come back to Ireland, mid-80s, still depressed place, still no jobs, nothing like that, and to just sit down in the silence every day and try to make something. And how foolish was that or not? So we really questioned that. So in a way, it echoes Williams' decision to one day come home and say, I'm not going back to the civil service anymore, and I'm going to paint. And a sense of vocation, which is troubling because there's no evidence or proof that it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And in his case, and in my case, there's no immediate success. It takes a long time. It took me 12 years after that to finally write 4 Letters of Love. Before that, we wrote 4 books together about moving to County Clare, and they did okay. They made enough money to live for 1 more year. We can stay 1 more year.
Yeah.
We can stay 1 more year, each time like that. So to some extent, when I eventually wrote 4 Letters for my first novel, it was to burst out of the 12 years it had been of that, trying to understand the choice that I'd made of an artistic life, and also the damage that can cause your family, and who have to pay for it because they're dealing with your own insecurity and your lack of a steady income and your everything, and say, what's the point of that? So to some extent, it was that.
Yeah, it's a great sort of depiction of that tension and the sense of calling. It's very powerful in the story, isn't it?
Yes.
It's almost a compulsion, really.
It is, and it makes no sense whatsoever. Any artist that's out there listening or writer, it makes no sense whatsoever. Why would you do this?
Yeah.
So it has to have another compulsive element to it, a vocational element for some people, an element of something driven, something that makes no rational sense at all for the financial returns, the insecurities of it, etc. Why would you do it? But in some cases, like in my case anyway, I had no other choice, I felt.
Yeah.
I felt it was what I had to do.
This is Life and Faith, and I'm speaking with Irish writer Niall Williams. Williams' novel 4 Letters of Love has been turned into a movie with some big stars, Pierce Brosnan and Helena Bonham Carter and Gabriel Byrne. Now, the characters in this story are not religious in a conventional sense, but I put it to Niall that God is present in this story in many profound ways. This was his response.
Absolutely. So I think that's part of that questing, part of that yearning, part of that looking for affirmation or acknowledgement or the nod that you are on the right path, which I think is that same thing that I related to the choice of an artistic life. To some extent, I had a very good friend who was a Jesuit priest for many years, and he would speak about it in relation to the Holy Spirit, and he took it out of he took it into a general context, if you like. He said the novel is full of the Holy Spirit. And while that's not my strongest intention, I'm not trying to make a religious message in the novel. The characters in this novel at that time in that Ireland certainly are aware of that all the time. Everyone in Ireland has grown up, almost everyone of my generation had grown up with strong religious teaching and so on. And I think Seamus Heaney has talked about the surfeit of that we grew up with a surfeit of divine mystery, a sense of divine mystery all the time in our day-to-day living. So it became such a part of your everyday fabric that it's then as an artistic person, how you connect those two things together.
Yes.
And to me, they have a natural marriage.
Yes. And in Ireland particularly, a kind of conflicted relationship with the institutional church, I guess.
Absolutely,
too.
yeah.
And that's a strongly part of your
Yeah.
stories. Although your writing, it always has a sort of sympathetic posture, I think, towards the core of the belief and what people
Yeah,
are.
they're
What
different
people are
things. I
looking
think
for.
they're different
Yes.
things. The belief is a completely different thing to the institution, and it's a generalization. But many Irish people are anti-establishment or institution. They have an inherent historic sense of distrust of institution.
There's some of that
Uh,
in Australia as well, by the way.
okay, so it might be, yeah, it's a sort
A
of
lot of Irish people have come to Australia, mind you.
yeah,
Yeah.
to escape institution, but I don't know. But it's a sense of that the anti-establishment or anti-institutional sense of, or just a longing for your own freedom, to be your own self. So yeah, the characters in the novel and in the film are all somewhat their own person. And so I live in the west of Ireland. I've lived in the west of Ireland for 40 years now, and I love the sense of that I still find in the people here of. When people say people are real characters, all they mean is that they are individuals full of their own quirk and not afraid to be themselves, which is a wonderful thing to be amongst. And as a novelist, is a thing I'm always trying to achieve.
Now, can you comment on the way William Coghlan, who's played by Pierce Brosnan in the film, the way he sees wonder and awe and transcendence and perhaps the glory of God, actually, in the natural world? And in his case, it's the Western Island, the seascapes there. And again, it's not easy or neat. There's a kind of manic, almost violent compulsion to his work, but there's something of that coming out of him, isn't there?
Yes, I think, and it's a very difficult thing to play. I think when he's in the west of Ireland, Pierce plays it very well. The sense that the closest he gets to transcendence is something beyond himself is when he's out in the immensity of nature, especially at the Atlantic coast. And I think that's a common enough experience, really. When people come to Ireland now, they particularly want to drive the wild Atlantic way. They want to be in the west of Ireland. They still feel it is different, other, that there's something free about it, and something that sort of makes you feel small because your own importance is diminished by the majesty and sounds and sights and smells of the Atlantic Ocean. So I think there is that, and I think definitely that is a central feature of the character of William, which makes it so difficult to play because he's not in dialogue scenes. He has very little dialogue scenes. He's mostly standing there and looking out or responding to, the rain or the sense of the weather in the west of Ireland. So, but I think that if you look at the start when in the film, and you look at how William is in the first scene when we see him in the civil service office, he's almost unrecognizable to the character he becomes at the end of the film.
Yes.
And as he has become the person that was always in him, but couldn't have been imagined from when you see him in the suit in the civil service at the start. If you put those two images side by side, I think you get some sense of the East and West, or the contained William and the freed William, some sense of that.
Absolutely. No, he carries that off brilliantly in that depiction. It's fabulous. Have we in the West neglected for too long the non-material aspects of life? Because people do hunger for something beyond that, don't they?
Well, I'm a person who's cautious about making any judgments on other people. I can only speak about myself, right?
Yeah.
So for myself, the decisions that I've made about my life and here with Christine are about giving importance in any decisions made to beauty, to nature, to the landscape. We have now developed a huge garden here. We wrote a book about our garden called In Kiltumper, and we, in some despair maybe at the state of the world, climate-wise, and the greater world, and how depressing the news can be about the natural world, we decided that all we can do is really try to improve the small piece of ground that we are living on. And so if we could improve the soil by 1 inch here, or just in the bit inside our hedge line, that would be a useful thing to do with your life. And so we've grown a major, large garden, beautiful, beautiful garden, and we're in the garden half of every day. So I only write in the mornings, and I'm in the garden with Chris in the afternoon. And that's how we live. So that is a life that is both a physical choice, but also a spiritual choice for us. And from that has come now, between the two of us, 20 books or plays or film in the 40 years. And so that's all I can talk about, really. What the West is doing or what the general world is. My experience as a novelist is about individuals. And there's still, as I said, I meet wonderful people, lots and lots of people who are caring and trying always to do the best thing, which, without saying that's a religious thing or whatever, without putting any judgments on it, because people are so different, I still feel there's sort of an enormous sense of hope there in that, in individuals, rather than when the general picture might be depressing, the individual can be heartening.
Yes. And there's a kind of love for your characters, I sense, that reflects that. It's really great. There's no question that, in my mind at least, that the geography and the weather plays such an important part in your writing, framing it and creating the atmosphere of the lives of these characters. Is that a particularly Irish thing?
Maybe it is. It's definitely true that the weather, and because we are on an edge here of Europe and we are looking out and there's nobody out ahead of us that we can see. And so a sense of the weather coming across the ocean to us maybe also add to some sense of having to look in nature for something other than just nature, because it's not as if we can have a sense of somebody nearby on the west coast of Ireland. So you're near an edge of something which might be the edge of more than just physical edge. And so, so the weather is important. Irish people, first conversation is always about the weather. And the marvelous thing is our weather here changes every hour. It changes all the time. So therefore, it's not like I'm hearing, about the heat dome in Europe, and as if Ireland is not in Europe. But we are in Europe, but we have no heat dome. So today it's a fine day here in County Clare. It's grey sky, it's still, it's maybe 16 degrees Celsius, and that's a good fine day. But it's July, right. So it could rain later and it could be sunny later. It's kind of, I suppose it builds in some kind of acceptance that it's not within your control at all, or predictability, and that you have to adapt yourself to it all the time.
I'm often struck by how great the Irish writers are, the short story writers, the novelists. I think you're one of them, but there's plenty of them. And I wonder if there's something in that, that sort of lyrical culture, isn't it? And I wonder if the weather sort of contributes a bit to that.
I'm sure the weather does contribute it, and there are an extraordinary boom at the moment in fiction writers particularly. But I also think that the Irish education system, which has its critics, but for me has always been grounded in the written word, in essay writing, and also honours very highly the literary traditions of Ireland. Yeah. So every Irish person going to school with me would know about, Seamus Heaney, and would know Yeats and Joyce and Beckett and all these great, O'Casey, all these great names, Frank O'Connor and so on. We'd all know those when we were 15 and 16 in the same way you might know, football players. And so if you were of a literary bent, you had a line that you wanted to follow that you were aware of.
There's a tragic romantic element to this story and other stories of yours. This is Happiness, for instance. And you're really great at creating this sort of visceral sense of the longing of romantic love and how that love intersects with, but it's not defeated by real life. I think that's part of what happens, isn't it, in your story?
Almost defeated. Almost defeated.
It does seem almost. But you're hopeful.
It always seems to me while I'm writing it that it's almost defeated, but not totally.
Well, Niall, it's so great chatting to you. Congratulations on the book is a long time ago, the film, which is coming out, and it's a great piece of work. So lovely to chat to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Simon. Pleasure talking to you.
This has been Life and Faith with me, Simon Smart. Thanks so much to Niall Williams for speaking with us today about his novel, now a film, 4 Letters of Love. The film is just out, so you might want to check that out. And also to have a look at Williams' other writing. I'll put links in the show notes to those books. They are highly recommended. Thanks to Matt Gallant at Mushroom Group for facilitating this conversation. And thanks to our producer, Alan Douthwaite. Next time.
I was speaking to a retired professional, had a very successful career. And he'd just retired, a few months before I was talking to him. He said, "All these years I thought I had friends, but I'd only had colleagues, and I've never known the difference." Our colleagues are not automatically our friends. We may have great working relationships with them. We may enjoy going to work with them. That's fantastic. But that does not a friend make.